Welcome everyone to this session. I think I'm going to briefly hand over before I do introductions and everything. I think my colleague Jill has some housekeeping notes just as we kick off. So I'll just hand over to Jill in a second, but welcome everyone to this is the webinar on talent is evenly distributed. The opportunity is not how to identify and support diverse talent, hosted by WhiteHat and the 5% Club. And from the 5% Club, we have Jill on the call on our panel. Jill.
Great, thanks, Dan. Welcome to everyone. I know the numbers are clicking up as we go in, so I hope everyone's got a chance to join us in good time. As Dan said, I'm Jill Cronin, I'm from the 5% Club. We have many 5% Club members here today, and welcome and thank you for joining us. And for those of you who don't know about the 5% Club, we're a skills campaigning charity, and we're really about ensuring people have the opportunity to gain the skills, access careers, and ultimately share in the nation's prosperity. I think that's quite timely with the Prime Minister's announcement today. So housekeeping. So as Dan said, we are recording this, and we are going to have a recording available of this available on both our websites, the WhiteHat website and the 5% Club website, in the next day or so. So if you miss any of it, if you want colleagues to share, they'll be able to access it. We have a lot of amazing speakers lined up, an embarrassment of riches. So if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A facility or chat. I'll be checking both. We may not have time to field those questions, and if we don't, we're going to share them with our speakers afterwards, and we will be preparing a post-event blog and we'll cover them. All our attendees, by the way, you are all on mute and you have no camera facility. The only people who do are our speakers. It's great to work with WhiteHat. Thank you all very, very much. And I think that then brings me on to our first speaker. I'm going to introduce Lindsay Trammell. Lindsay is Head of Policy and Innovation at the Social Mobility Commission. Thank you, Lindsay, for joining us. By the way, if anyone's missed it, there's been two amazing reports recently from the Social Mobility Commission. In June, they produced apprenticeships and social mobility, and just very recently, in September, the long shadow probation, benefits and opportunities across England. Both reports are on the 5% Club website, should you wish to access them. I highly recommend reading both of them. So without further ado, over to Lindsay.
Thank you so much. Can I just check, Jill, before you go on mute, can you hear me all right?
Yep, we can hear you. Yep, all great.
Brilliant, thank you. I had a complete IT meltdown right before, so apologies if I caused any stress for the WhiteHat folks, but I'm here and I appreciate you've got the slides, so brilliant. Thank you everyone for having me. As was said, I work for the Social Mobility Commission. We are what we call in government an arm's length body, so we are a kind of an independent arm's length body out of the Department of Education, and we report to 12 independently publicly appointed commissioners. We have a remit to monitor social mobility and to promote it. So we produce evidence, we work with employers, and you'll be hearing a bit more about the intersection of those two things where we apply the high quality research and evidence into action on the ground for employers. So starting with though, what is social mobility? Well, it's the link between a person's occupation or income and the occupation or income of their parents. So in other words, it's simply about ensuring your background doesn't determine your future. So in a society with high social mobility, the link between your background, your parents' job and their level of income and where you end up in life is really low. In a society like ours, unfortunately in the UK, we have a society with quite low relative social mobility. So that link between a person's background and their future is quite strong. But luckily, we're all here to address that. Next slide, please. So when employers think not just about apprenticeships, which of course we're here to talk about, but think more expansively about socioeconomic diversity, it begs the question, why should you care? Well, yes, there's a moral case, sure, but we all know employers have to you also have to justify this. There has to be a business case. Fortunately, there's some quite good evidence that more diverse businesses support innovation. So we know, for example, that those with the longest journey often have the most to offer. Employees, some of our research shows that employees from lower socioeconomic backgrounds on average outperform their more advantaged peers. We also see that individuals who start as apprentice are more likely to stay long term, and that can potentially reduce recruitment costs. We also know that diverse companies are successful companies, and this is even more important in the moment when everyone is struggling to survive. Diversity and inclusion are not things to do only when times are good. They are core to how your business avoids groupthink, how you innovate, how you problem solve. It should be more important now than ever before to make sure that you have diversity of thinking throughout your business. And as we've said, I apologize, there's a issue on our slides here. We've got a repeated message, but as we say, there's evidence that both apprenticeships and diversity of apprenticeships can drive innovation, can help your business perform, and can really help individuals' lives. Next slide, please. So what's happening? We at the Commission, as I said, produce high quality research and evidence. We talk to government about policy, and we talk to employers about improving socioeconomic diversity of the workplace. Well, we were concerned that there were some warning signs that perhaps apprenticeships were not delivering on their social mobility potential. So we conducted a robust bit of research and evidence to really dig deep. So I appreciated that nod from Jill at the start. It's totally right. You can go and read the whole report. We use linked administrative data. So it's one of the most high quality, robust looks at apprenticeships and social mobility. And what did we find? What should you take away? Well, unfortunately, we found that since the levy began, employers have fallen into the same old trap. They're recruiting from the same groups of people, and the numbers show it. So since the levy began, 36% fewer disadvantaged apprentices are even getting on. In particular, older women from disadvantaged backgrounds have been the most affected. And while we see generally kind of poor performance on starts for lower socioeconomic background apprentices all over the country, we also see that a lot of this is being driven in London. And older women, again, older in apprentice context means over 25, which I know sounds a bit odd, but those over 25 women from low socioeconomic backgrounds are being particularly affected in the London area. So then what happens once they're through the door, those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are often on lower value apprenticeships. So they don't get the same quality out of the training. So that's both because they're on literally lower level courses, that kind of level 2, level 3 GCSE A-level equivalent, whereas their more privileged apprentices peers are taking advantage of those level 6s, those degree level. But also, we found even when you look at the same apprenticeship at the same level in the same subject matter, we found quality gaps by socioeconomic background. So we simply found that there is disparities based on a person's background. Then we looked at, okay, what about attrition and progression? We kind of broadly know that there's, from a policy perspective, quite higher than we would like attrition in the apprenticeship system. Well, again, we found disadvantage gaps that apprentices from disadvantaged backgrounds are being overlooked for progression opportunities, and more of them drop out early. Finally, we looked at the very end. What happens after that apprenticeship? Well, now, here's the thing. We found that disadvantaged apprentices have lower career earnings. However, and this is the really important bit because this has been a really depressing news story up till now, but here's the shining light, the silver lining of it all. When a disadvantaged apprentice can overcome these relentless challenges and barriers and gaps, they benefit more from the apprenticeship. So they get at that individual level a bigger boost in earnings from doing the course compared to their peers. So what we're seeing here is that employers are missing out on diversity and on that innovative groupthink potential, or avoiding groupthink, I should say. Employers are missing out on a more diverse workforce, and individuals are missing out. So the system right now is not delivering for those who could most take advantage of it. So you're probably sitting there thinking, well, why should I care? Well, in part because you have the ability to fix this. There is only so much that policy can do, because ultimately an apprenticeship is a job. So while we do care about talking to government about what reforms can happen, we also think there is a critical role for employers. And again, it should be an almost selfish view of yours. You get a benefit from this too, right? And I'm sure many of our other speakers will talk to the benefits their apprenticeship systems have brought to their own businesses. So what can you do about it? If we can go to the next slide. And I'm conscious I'm going to keep this quite tight because I don't want to take time away from other amazing speakers today. So we have a range of recommendations and things you can do. We split up the journey into each kind of employee journey. So you can look at outreach, hiring, support once your apprentice is there, progression after they're done with that apprenticeship, how to use data, and how to then share your levy if you're not going to be using it all. But look, again, I don't want to take up too much time of my colleagues. So here are the things. If you can't do anything else, the things you should really be thinking about is, first and foremost, remove qualification requirements. So are you using qualifications as an artificial barrier for entry? Do you really need an A level, for example, if you are hiring for a call center worker? That is a story one of our co-chairs of the commission, Stephen Cooper, who's a senior exec himself, talks about. He was trying to hire apprentices in Wales, where there was some of the highest unemployment in the country, and he couldn't find anyone. And he thought, how bizarre is this? Surely there are people. They went back, did an introspective look at their own policies, and realized it's because they were asking for an A level. And as he says, you just don't need it. You need motivated people, and you need to put support around them. So use that positive language, break down those, reduce the need to focus on things like internships, work experience, or social activities to get into the door. And then once they're in the door, make sure you're supporting those apprentices. Please try to consider if you can pay a fair wage. We know about a third of disadvantaged apprentices drop out because they cannot afford their apprenticeship. Use mentors, take advantage of digital meetings to give shadowing opportunities, and think about what happens to that apprentice after they leave. Build a pipeline up from level 2 if you can, if that suits your business need. And make sure it's very clear, once that apprentice finishes at level 2 or level 3, can they go on to a level 4? Can they move on to a level 5? If not, how do they continue progressing in your business? And so I've covered several things, but then the most important thing, measure your workforce and measure your apprentices. We hear this time and again. We deliver masterclasses each month on a specific area of our toolkit, and I would invite everyone to take a look at those. We record them, put them up on our microsite. But what we hear time and again from some of the best employers out there is they start doing some things, and then they realize, actually, they go back to the data and see, that didn't really work. We need to adjust. We need to innovate. We need to try something else. And the thing is, if you don't measure your data, you cannot use it to inform your strategy. We at the Commission, in kind of early November or sometime in November, we will be updating our guidance on what to measure and how to measure. We are simplifying it, making it more accessible, adding national benchmarks and industry level benchmarks for a few industries. So I really encourage you to stay prepared for that and to build the measurement recommendations that we have in our toolkit into your business. So you can visit socialmobilityworks.org, and I'll be happy to pop that in the chat as well for folks to find. We have a recording of an apprenticeship webinar we gave, so you can go into more detail, hear case studies, look at after packs, all kinds of support material. And ultimately, I would end by saying, please reach out to us. Let us know how best we can support you in this journey. That's part of our role, and I appreciate the opportunity here to talk to everyone, and I hope this was useful. So thank you very much. I'll cede the floor back.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. That's fantastic, Lindsay Trammell from Social Mobility Commission there. Next up, we have a fantastic one of my colleagues, Siobhan Randell from WhiteHat. Before I introduce Siobhan, I'll just do a quick kind of top line introduction to WhiteHat. So WhiteHat is a tech startup on a mission to create a diverse group of future leaders. Our mission is to create an outstanding alternative to university through apprenticeships to give people from all backgrounds the opportunity to have great careers at brilliant companies. At WhiteHat, we focus on 3 core areas: giving employers a framework for measuring potential outside of academics and work experience, bringing incredible content from around the world into applied learning programs, and growing an apprenticeship community to enable young people to build social capital and strong professional networks. Now, next up is Siobhan from WhiteHat. She is our inclusion and diversity lead. And Siobhan is an expert in community outreach, diversity and inclusion within tech and education, and represents WhiteHat as a member of the Inclusion and Diversity Council and the Future of Work subcommittee, supporting 5,000 members in creating a more inclusive tech sector. Siobhan was also named as one of the 2020 BEMA 100 most influential and pioneering individuals in tech for the Champions of Change category. Siobhan.
Wow, that's some introduction. Thank you so much, Dan. Yes, so as Lindsay said, there's so many things we could focus on. My role as inclusion and diversity lead covers how we find the talent, which is very much what we're going to focus on today. But that's just one part of the puzzle. So just as Lindsay said, there's also how you then support young people to thrive when they're on your apprenticeship, which we do through our high quality education and community offer. And then there's also ensuring that there's that progression support so that is kickstarting a long-term career for that young person. But today we're really going to focus on that outreach element. But I'm happy to, in the follow-up questions, or if you email your questions through, to answer how we kind of address social mobility later on in our offer as well. So the outreach team at WhiteHat is a kind of small team that I lead that look after Greater London and the surrounding counties, and will soon be kind of expanding nationwide as well. Our offer can be split into kind of 3 focus areas. So we have a schools and colleges liaison programme that starts from about age 14, so before the young people start their GCSEs, and we will engage with those young people right up to when they leave school, because we know they're most likely to come to us at the end of year 13. Although we do get some applications from year 11s and year 12s, but not many. I think they all kind of vote with their feet that they'd need a couple more years of sixth form and college before they're ready for work. But as part of our schools and colleges liaison programme, we have a really engaged group of apprentices that volunteer as outreach leaders and go into their communities, go into their schools and colleges, and spread the word about apprenticeships, act as kind of really relatable role models to young people for what they could achieve. This programme in 2019 reached 14,000 young people, parents, carers, teachers, and other influential figures in the lives of young people. And we very much prioritise our partners based on those areas of need. So we look at schools and colleges and multi-academy trusts that serve communities with very high levels of deprivation, but we will consider requests from all schools and try and get ourselves to as many schools as possible. We then have our mission-aligned partnerships. So this is us really thinking about reaching the young people within the support services that they might already be accessing. And often these are young people that are facing the highest barriers to continuing education or employment. So this might be young people who are accessing the job centre services because they are unemployed, NEET as it's called in the space. They might be young people who are part of one of our closest charity partners, Drive Forward, where we support young people who are leaving the care system to progress into apprenticeships. And we offer workshops. We work closely with the key workers supporting those young people to give them every chance to be successful in our processes. We then have our tech-focused outreach. These programs are really important because we notice that there really is an extra barrier to getting onto a tech apprenticeship, because especially at the higher levels, as Lindsay mentioned, the kind of level 4s and above, you do require a level of digital skills. So if you simply have never been given the opportunity to develop them, when we put you in front of our incredible employers, you're going to struggle, especially if there's any element of coding testing or things that you have to do. If you've never written a line of code in your life, you're not going to be in the most competitive position. This is about really giving the young people those pre-apprenticeship opportunities to get a taster of these skills and develop these skills so that when they are applying to us, they are just as competitive as everybody else. And we've done 3 programs so far: a Tech Expo series, which is based on different localities in London, a FinTech Insight program that's specifically aimed at young women, and our Tech Talent Accelerator program, which is the one we're concentrating at the moment because it's the most long-term and the most intensive for the young people. Perfect. So what is our Tech Talent Accelerator? It's a free 6-week data and software engineering pre-apprenticeship bootcamp. It's specifically for 18 to 24-year-olds who are NEET and may also be facing different barriers that the research has shown do act as barriers to employment and education, whether that's living in a neighbourhood with high levels of deprivation. We look at the 20% most deprived neighbourhoods as per the government's IMD, whether they've been in local authority care, whether they've had refugee status, or whether they have dependents or caring responsibilities themselves. And then just as Daniel was saying, we really give that different framework for what potential looks like. WhiteHat are highly competitive, and we're very honest about that with our candidates. It's just what best looks like to us might be very different than they're used to hearing in traditional educational settings, or that you might see from some of your most competitive universities. That doesn't mean that the candidates aren't absolutely fantastic. They are, and it's a rigorous process. But what we're looking for is much more about that holistic view of the young person and what they could offer a team. So we look at grit and determination, times that they've overcome adversity, when they've really stuck something out when it was tough. And actually, if you've managed to hold down a Saturday job in a supermarket throughout your time of college, I think that says a lot about you and maybe says a bit more about your sticking power than just your grades. We look at interpersonal skills, so how they interact with others, how they interact with us. Conscientiousness, which is really about their desire to do well and to do tasks to the best of their ability and simply to just turn up every time. Problem solving, which is what it says in the tin. Are they solution focused? Are they willing to give a problem a go? And intent. How much do they really want it? Again, our apprenticeships, we feel, can be transformative opportunities for young people and are highly competitive. So we want the young people who really want this opportunity. Next slide, please. And here's just one example of a recent graduate from our Tech Talent Accelerator. We've just finished, cohort 1 finished in July, and they were interviewing with lots of our clients in kind of August time. And many of them have started their level 4 software engineering apprenticeships this Monday, actually, which is very exciting. And one of those young people is Fatima. Fatima is an incredibly inspirational young woman. She has overcome significant barriers in her educational journey, including being in care. She completed an apprenticeship before, but really knew that she wanted to get into tech. And worked really hard during the 6-week boot camp to get the level of digital skills that she needed for a higher software engineering apprenticeship. And she's now starting her apprenticeship at an incredible company, Depop, who took a couple of the grads as well. So there'll be a nice community there. And we've also had grads start at Unilever, at Salesforce, at Westminster City Council. And our second cohort are starting their boot camps this Monday, and they'll be ready to interview with clients from around November and December. So if you are looking for any software engineers, please get in touch. They are phenomenal young people who have, as I've said, overcome adversity, will bring so much to your organization, and will also have a really solid level of digital skills and employability skills, because the program teaches both hard skills around coding, but every young person also gets an employability mentor to work with them on those soft skills as well. That's everything from me.
Great, fantastic. Thank you, Siobhan. Great. So up next, we have Laura Carter. who works on inclusion, community and wellbeing at PwC, and she'll be talking about schools outreach at PwC. A brief introduction to Laura. Laura works within the social mobility team at PwC and leads their schools outreach work in the north of England and Scotland. In her current role, Laura is responsible for designing and delivering the PwC Schools Outreach Programme to disadvantaged secondary school students in order to develop their workplace skills. Prior to joining PwC, Laura spent 3 years as a primary school teacher as part of the Teach First programme. And from this experience, Laura saw firsthand the impact of the lack of opportunity and information, even at a young age, and it affirmed her view that an individual should not be limited or defined by their background. So next up, Laura Carter from PwC.
Thanks, Daniel. So I'm Laura Carter. I'm really pleased to be here today to talk to you about our schools outreach at PwC. So just a couple of high level what we're going to cover. I will try and stick to my 10 minutes slot. I'll give you a brief introduction to our strategy, our schools outreach programme, our impact, and then what kind of have we learned, particularly over the last few months during COVID, and how that's impacting us, taking us forwards. Next slide, please. So as we've all heard, and Lindsay mentioned as well at the start, we know that social mobility is a huge issue for us as a country, and we know that businesses have a really important role to play in addressing that issue across the country. So as a business, about 3 years ago, we created a dedicated social mobility team, developed a social mobility strategy and a vision as well to go together as well. And we really set ourselves targets to hold ourselves to account, to check that we are making a difference and having that impact. So our vision is, I won't read it through, it's there on the slides, but the things to really pick out will be, we've got these 3 priorities which kind of underpin all of our vision. We've got inclusion, community, and then advocacy as well. And today I'm going to pick up on our community strand, which really encompasses our outreach programme in our local communities. Next slide, please. So we have a long-standing commitment to working in the local communities, both from a community affairs perspective and a recruitment perspective. So this really means that we can reach a wider and a more diverse audience, both from an outreach and a recruitment perspective, so that we can influence our talent pool into the business as well. And we've been working with schools for a number of years. As a social mobility team, we target students who are at secondary schools who meet our social mobility criteria. And what that means to us is we've chosen to use free school meal percentage as an indicator. We know that there are a number of different ways that you can look at deprivation or disadvantage, but this is the one that we've chosen to identify that our target schools. In parallel to us, our recruitment team works also with disadvantaged students across the UK, but their aim is to recruit onto our school and college leaver programmes, both immediately apprenticeships into the business as well as our degree apprenticeships as well that we have on offer in our Flying Start degrees. So we work really closely as a social mobility team with the recruitment colleagues, but our focus is on upskilling the young people that we work with more broadly, so they can go on to be successful in whatever career they want to go and choose. And in the time in the team, I've come across a wide variety of careers that students want to go on and join. Of course, as an added bonus to doing our work, it's another opportunity to raise our brand awareness of PwC, to raise awareness of our opportunities. So although we're not primarily driven by recruiting in our team, it's of course an added bonus, and we can raise awareness at the same time. So the images on the screen. So before COVID-19, this was our plan for our schools outreach programme, and it had a number of different activities within it, as indicated by the pyramid. And the real aim for that was to have a broad offering lots of different types of activities, but also the ones at the top of the pyramid were targeted with the more sustained activity. So our Dive into Digital programme would be a 3-day programme, so we'd see them repeated. Likewise with mentoring, it would be a repeated relationship with the students. Now, before COVID, we aimed to target around 10,000 encounters throughout the academic year, and obviously then the pandemic hit. So when the pandemic hit, we had to rethink our strategy. We had to rethink what how and what our outreach was going to look like for the next year, while still working with secondary school students in our areas that we targeted, and trying to make sure that we're keeping to our focus of upskilling them in the ways they need to be successful. Next slide, please. So what are we doing this year? So our schools outreach for 2021 will be fully virtual for the coming year. And then beyond that, who knows? We will just have to wait and see what curveballs come around the corner. But we know how important it is to still be able to offer opportunities like this to young people across the country. We hear in the media regularly how COVID has been disproportionately affecting young people across the country. So we didn't want to just stop. We wanted to make sure that we still had something on offer for young people. The beauty of virtual, so trying to swing it into a positive, is that we're no longer limited by location or office capacity. So typically, if we were going into schools or we were going into offices, having them come to us, we were limited by how far away they were from our offices and how many students we could fit into one of our meeting rooms and whether they were available. Now, being virtual, we've taken those limits away, which is really, really exciting. So again, this program will be targeted at students at disadvantaged secondary schools, so those schools that have higher than average proportion of students eligible for free school meals. And we've really got two main offerings currently. Our back to schools tour would typically have been run face-to-face, so we'd have gone into schools, we'd have delivered assembly type sessions, introducing them to PwC and who we were. But this autumn, we are running 3 live stream talks. So they're going to be 3 types on offer. We're going to have a business one, which will be more of an introduction to business, the world of business, what PwC does and the kind of work that we do. And this will be really targeted at our social mobility schools. Our accounting and technology sessions are aimed at the 6th form age and really to promote and to aim to recruit students onto our Flying Start degree programs as well. So that would be our one smaller offer. Our main offer is our 6-week virtual skills program for this year, which we've designed from scratch as to fit the world that we now find ourselves in. So the idea for this is that it will run over a period of 6 weeks. Each week will cover a different employability skill, whether that's teamwork or problem solving or leadership, a whole range of different ones over the 6 weeks. And it will really be making up a combination of some sessions delivered by PwC, some activities in the classroom, as well as some optional further learning for the students to take part in once they've worked through the programme. Our kind of underpinning driver for this, for how we've designed it, is flexibility for the teacher. We're acutely aware of how pressured teachers' time is. As Daniel said in my introduction, I am a former teacher, so I'm very aware of how precious time is for teachers, and having something that's ready to go with minimal preparation and how important it is. And we also know, because of COVID, with schools being closed for the last 6 months, they're going to have additional pressures. So we didn't want to take up their time with an hour here or a whole day here. So ours is going to be very much short video sessions that they can plug and play on demand whenever that suits, and there'll be additional stuff to go alongside that, so they can almost pick and choose the bits of the program that they want and they will feel appropriate for their students. So the first cycle of this is launching in November for years 10 to 13, and then we're going to run another one in the spring for the younger year groups, as we hear that there is a lot of appeal for that. I think a lot of programs directly go to that older population, but we know the younger students also need that engagement with employers and the skills. And then the plan is that we'll continue to run this year on year, 3 times a year. We hope that we can revert to face-to-face activity when we're able to, when it's safe to do so, when restrictions allow, as we know that working face-to-face with the kinds of students we want to engage with is the most impactful. But this virtual offering, if we continue to run it, will allow us to reach a much broader audience in those areas that we just simply cannot get to from where we are based. So Scottish Highlands, the coastal areas down in Devon and Cornwall where we don't have an office. This will be an opportunity for a broad range of students. Next slide, please. So what impact have we had? So we report on our community activity in our non-financial scorecard, which is within our annual report, which is published every year, as it says on the tin. And it really allows us to hold ourselves to account and to really keep track of our progress against the targets that we set when we set our strategy 3 years ago. So we haven't yet published our most recent data, which would have been up to June 2020 because of everything going on. And of course, those numbers will be impacted by COVID and the schools closures. But in the last couple of years, these numbers just show the kind of impact that we're having. So over 21,000 young people that we've already worked with, and then our own virtual Insight Week, our Insight Week workplace work experience program for year 12 students. Again, we can offer some more places. This year we had to run that slightly differently. We ran it virtually, but that meant that over 1,000 students were able to engage with us over the week. So finally, just if the last slide, please. Thank you. Just a few quick things to run through about what we've learned, especially over the last few months. Getting to the right person in school, as I said, teachers are very busy, so you want to make sure that your offer is landing in the right in tray of the right person. So we've developed relationships with partner organisations, people like the Sutton Trust, people like the local enterprise partnerships, local councils, to make sure that they are on board with our offer and can really sell it and promote it to the schools, so that we are reaching the ones that are most going to benefit from our offer. Safeguarding has been a big one, especially throughout COVID, with students being at home and not in school. So we've developed our own safeguarding guidance document to make sure that our own volunteers are comfortable and are able to deliver and engage with these kind of programs. The challenges of a virtual offering, I talked about the positives, but the other challenges, of course, again, in the media, we hear about this digital divide, that the disadvantaged students don't have access to a computer, or they don't have the space that they need or the quiet time that they need to be able to really engage with this sort of activity. So we've used previously a mixture of live and pre-recorded sessions to hopefully bridge that gap so they can again have it on demand when they're able to. And moving forward, hopefully students will stay in school. We'll have to wait and see whether that happens. And our intention for our program is that it's the teacher signing up for this class, so they will be involved as a class or a group of students, and again we can be beamed into the classroom. And then finally is the importance of having some interactivity. I think the temptation is with making something virtual is that you just talk at students. I think as adults and working virtually for the last 6 months, we know how real Zoom fatigue is. So when we've been designing our sessions, we're making sure they're short, they're tailored, and we're also thinking about how they can be interactive, whether that's using something like Slido, quizzes, polls, or even using breakout groups if we're using software such as Zoom. Appreciate that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight into our approach to outreach at PwC. And again, happy to answer any questions. So thank you very much for listening.
Thanks so much, Laura. Laura there from PwC. Next up, we have Deborah and Magdalena from Pinsent Masons. A little bit more about Debs and Magda. So Debs is head of early talent at Pinsent Mason, which is a global law firm, and is also the chair of the board at the Institute of Student Employers and a member of the 5% Club. Originally a corporate lawyer, Debs moved into L&D and early talent in the legal sector with the aim to set up those she worked with for maximum success. Increasingly, the work undertaken by Debs and her wider early talent team is focused on diversifying the firm and profession's succession plan to widen participation and to enable talent regardless of background or circumstances. As for Magda, Magda is the graduate recruitment officer at Pinsent Masons, and her role primarily focuses on the successful delivery of the firm's UK-wide vacation placement programme, a first-year work experience scheme and award-winning open access virtual work experience programme. This year, Magda has been project managing, adapting Pinsent Masons' in-house programs to a virtual environment amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And they'll be speaking to us today about how the virtual work experience compares to in-house placements and how they make the most of it at Pinsent Masons. Debs and Magda.
Thank you very much. Debs, can you hear us? I think you might be muted.
Sorry, I've done the classic, forgotten to
unmute.
Hi everyone, and thanks very much to 5% Club and to WhiteHat for inviting Magda and I to participate today. So we've been asked to touch on our recent experience of virtual work experience programs and adapting to virtual from the physical in-house experience. A confession to make at the top of our session: as a business and as an early talent team, this is still relatively new territory for us too, probably a bit like Laura at PwC. COVID has certainly been the catalyst to expedite our experience in the virtual world, as I'm sure it has been for many businesses, and also for the students participating in virtual work experience alike. So if we just move on to the next slide, please. So the picture on this slide is actually taken from our welcome page of our open access programme, and anyone that's on the call, you're very welcome to jump onto our early talent website and to have a look at that open access programme if you're looking for inspiration, if you're thinking about designing or tweaking your own virtual programmes. So far as a business and as an early talent team, we've designed and launched 3 different virtual programmes so far. Pleased to say that we were slightly ahead of the COVID curve with our first programme, the Open Access programme, which does exactly what it says on the tin. It's accessible by anyone, really aimed, I suppose, at undergraduate or undergraduate level, or anyone thinking about perhaps a level 3 or level 4 entry legal apprenticeship, just to provide insight into the legal, corporate and commercial world. So our experience of designing and launching that programme helped hugely when we made the pretty quick decision at the onset of the COVID crisis to pivot away from what would be our normal UK-wide in-office programme for 2020 students. And we decided to deliver that summer vacation placement virtually. In the current environment, so given that things haven't really haven't moved on much, we decided to go all in this year and deliver a first year undergraduate programme virtually too, and that successfully rolled out a few weeks ago. So what this meant for us as a business was that really all of our planned work experience for students that we would ordinarily have physically in our business across all of our UK offices, we were able to deliver all of that more or less along the lines of the original schedule. And we also were able to cover the vast majority of the content and experience that those students would have been provided with had they actually been in our office, just in a slightly different virtual format, so COVID secure, which we found to be incredibly beneficial. And I think Laura touched on this in her last session, and in so many ways, as long as it's interactive, just as engaging as it would have been had they been in the office with us. So just moving on to our next slide.
I think we were on the right slide, if we can go one back.
Oh, sorry, where are we?
That's key benefits, there you go. Sorry, Debs.
Yeah, so key benefits. Yeah, so the pictures on this slide were actually provided by our virtual summer vacation interns, sharing pictures of their social event. This one was in Leeds, and also of their home offices. We've also got an Instagram post there from our one of our first year programme participants. So we just wanted to touch really quickly, because this is a kind of canter through our experience, but just touching on each of the benefits that we've really felt we've experienced now, having run this a couple of times over the past few months. The biggest benefit for us of virtual work experience has, and really for all stakeholders, has to be accessibility. So whether we've looked at that through the global kind of location lens, which Laura also touched on in her session, or from the wider diversity and inclusion perspective, virtual opportunities are providing insight for students regardless of their location, regardless of their background or their circumstances. And we can see that in terms of our stats from the volume of students who are enrolling and completing our open access programme in particular. And when we were designing our summer, the virtual summer internship, we very much had social mobility front of mind, because we were conscious that we wanted to enable students with part-time jobs, and Siobhan touched on this earlier as well, students with part-time jobs over the summer or perhaps caring responsibilities. We wanted them to be able to dip in and out of the content and recordings of live events, just to ensure that they were still able to have that ability to earn during their holidays. We've had feedback, which is really pleasing to hear, actually, that the students have testified to this now, because many of them were able to participate, and ordinarily they might have had to decline an offer of a summer job, or they would have had to have taken a couple of weeks of holiday to be able to participate in a physical in-office programme. So the way that we designed it helped to sort of facilitate a bit of flex and allowed them to participate while they were still earning. We've also found virtual to be a great platform for our brand. So in terms of other benefits, students are completing programs like this and they're talking about it on social media. So lots of LinkedIn posting, which is great. That then creates a little bit of a buzz and that virtuous circle, which encourages their peers to jump on to see what your firm's open access program has to offer. So that's definitely been a virtuous cycle. And it's also a great way for candidates to try different organisations and even different sector offerings before they commit to focus on securing perhaps further physical in-office work experience with your business, or they start to knuckle down and really focus on a particular career in a specific area, with all the investment of time in terms of application and recruitment processes to go through on that. So it's a real shop window for us, for our business, and it can be a shop window for your organisations as well. So from the student feedback, we've also recognised that the virtual world provides a brilliant platform to connect not just the students and the interns to each other, but also to showcase our senior talent through Q&A and panel sessions like this. Also, right, this is typical Zoom. There's somebody at my door. Hang on a second. Can you just leave it? Sorry about that. Yeah, so it's been a great shop window for our business, but also to get our senior people engaged in a way that we could do in a physical environment through classroom or auditorium sessions, but we've actually had a lot more engagement from so many, like a wide variety of senior people across our business, because doing it like this is actually really convenient for them too. So we've just finished, for example, our new graduate started a couple of weeks ago, and we had an amazing 2-week virtual induction with those guys, and we had sessions from our senior partner on our transition to becoming a purpose-led business. We had a great live Q&A on our strategy with our managing partner. We've had design sprint sessions, and some of these sessions also happened for our virtual interns and first year students as well, on innovation and legal technology. We've had clients to be able to support us delivering sessions and giving some client perspective. So it's been a great way for our students and our new graduates to be able to access so many more of our different colleagues across our network. So in that kind of regard, it's felt very democratic. It's been a real leveler, whether that's in terms of the location that the student is in, because we've been able to open that up to a much bigger number of individuals, or even just in terms of different personality types. The more kind of gregarious extrovert students have really engaged in asking questions of our people in a live format, but the candidates that are slightly more introverted, they found it a great environment in which they can ask questions on the chat function. So actually it's quite good in terms of that personality piece as well. Magda's going to touch on next what we have learned through putting these new programs together.
Excellent, thank you very much, Debs. Yeah, so just a couple of top tips and lessons learned from moving our vacation placement online. Hope you find them useful, whether you're planning for a full-on work experience program or just maybe insight days or workshops. So number one, tech is important, but it really doesn't have to be complicated. In our case, Insight Sherpa was a hub for the students, somewhere where they can access all their information and materials, connect with their peers and mentors, and submit their work. However, all of our events were done via MS Teams. And as Debs mentioned, recently our graduate development team have successfully conducted a trainee induction program using only in-house software. So for us, Inside Sherpa worked as we had a lot of content to share with the students, which might have been problematic via email. But if you're focusing mostly on events and kind of mentoring scheme, then you could run an Insight evening or placement using only internal software. Number two, project management is crucial, as you will need to spend a lot of time preparing the content for the program, such as schedule, mentors, and also making sure the technical aspect of the placement is ready for the launch. But also you will get a lot of questions during the program, both internally and from the students. And those will be ranging from technical issues to a simple, I would like to know more about XYZ part of your business. Whom can I speak to? So you will need to have someone who will be able to act as a main point of contact for everyone. We found that one-to-one contact and receiving regular feedback were very important to our participants and formed one of the biggest highlights of their time with us. It made their experience more personal, tailored to their needs, and gave them an opportunity to learn from experienced colleagues. So not just a platform, of course, user-friendly tech is important, but people who will interact with your interns will be the cornerstone of your program. So they are even more important. Another important aspect of our virtual internship were social events. They, of course, allow participants to connect with each other and people within the business in a more casual environment. And there are things that you can organize yourself, such as quiz or trivia night, or you can refer to many resources available online, such as bingo or escape rooms. Next point on my list is start small. So if you are a small business or simply you would like to try hosting a series of events, you can start with an Insight evening, mock interviews, or online workshops for the students. So it really doesn't have to be a month-long scheme. You can try it out first and see how it goes. If you decide to run one program across various locations, it's important to keep the content the same. Even small differences, which you may find insignificant, such as different social events, they won't go unnoticed by the participants. So make sure that you treat all the locations and all the participants exactly the same. And finally, one consistent feedback that we've received at the back of our virtual internship was that candidates really enjoyed talking to senior lawyers and representatives from across the globe, as Debs mentioned. So this is something that normally we would have it would be much more difficult for us to achieve in-house. So I would really encourage you to reach out to a variety of colleagues in your business to make a lasting impression on the students. Next slide, please. So here's some of the feedback received about our open access program and the virtual internship. A lot of the open access participants commented they appreciated the flexibility of the program and the fact that they can complete it over a weekend or stretch it over a few weeks, and also take part in it without the daily commute or even moving to the city, taking holidays, as that's mentioned, to undertake the program. And that's exactly what we wanted to achieve. So as you can see, on the picture, since launching in September 2019, we have over 7,000 people who enrolled to our UK and Australian programs. And I personally really like this feedback from one of our vacation placement students who suggested that virtual placements and agile working is something that will only grow in post-COVID world. And yeah, I think personally, it's quite likely. So I hope that you found our insights and tips useful. As I said, whether you're planning for just one day of workshops and insights or a full-on vacation scheme for a couple of weeks, we are here to answer your questions either today, or you can just drop us an email and contact us directly. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Magda and Debs. I've just, the neighbours' kids are being noisy outside, so sorry if you can hear that. We've got next up, just to take us up to the hour, is Andre Flemings. I'm not going to do the full introduction here, just in the interest of time. I will just make one note. If you do have any questions, please put them in the chat. We won't have time to answer them now, but if you have a particular person you want to ask a question to, put it in the chat. We'll make sure we follow up with them, and in our roundup email to all attendees, we'll make sure those questions are answered at the bottom. Handing over now to Andre.
Well, thank you very much for having me. You get to see a lovely picture of me because I've decided not to give you any slides, partly because I think actually everything you've heard before is what I would end up saying based on my experiences here at Macfarlane's, where I've been for the past 3 months. Prior to this, where I was at Linklaters, and before this when I was at Deutsche Bank, and also working at Rare as a head of comms. Where we sort of helped in my time there to sort of come to put together the contextual recruitment system. I guess what I'm going to talk to you about very briefly is really my experiences of working with lots of different industry areas as a consultant, as someone who worked at an organisation like Rare that works on social mobility and other strands of diversity. I guess my in-house experiences as a recruiter and a D&I specialist in particular, and how that has fed into, I guess, my understanding of what businesses need, but also the perceptions of business that impacts the work that we're doing to make these organisations bigger and broader. And I guess my opening remarks are fairly obvious. There is no panacea to actually improving the socioeconomic diversity of our organisations, particularly the most selective of our organisations. I think, from my experience, the incremental improvements at every single element of what we do, so attraction, where we go, where what we say when we're on campus, how we say it, and across which platforms we sort of interact with individuals is a really important aspect. The same is true of the recruitment process itself, and in terms of what we're asking for. And I know Lindsay talked about some of the high level differences there, how we assess candidates, what we assess them on, and what we ask them, and actually what we're ultimately looking for. And then so on into sort of the support and the progression change that we're looking at as well. I would also say that, data, again, you've heard this again, is super, super vital in all of these aspects. I think in all of the work that I was involved with at Linklaters, and I was involved, I devised the social mobility strategy from a recruitment perspective there, which included us launching the first virtual internship in the UK last year. One of our main focuses was looking at social mobility and our early careers opportunities as talent pipelines first, but with diversity as the overlay. And I think that's a really important thing that a lot of the internal stakeholders sometimes are challenged with, because if we are being honest, a lot of our internal stakeholders may not necessarily have as much contact or understanding of social mobility or other strands of diversity as perhaps we might like. So actually there is a base layer of support and information that our stakeholders need in order for these sorts of programs to be a real success. So I think that will be probably one of my key sort of takeaways from actually everything that you've heard. These programs at the entry level are all well and good, but if your individuals do not stay, then they are effectively a waste of time and are raising aspirations in a way that is actually unhelpful. I'd say also, on the intersectional point, socioeconomics is, as many of you will be aware, quite an amorphous kind of set of circumstances, whether it's a geographical element about where you grew up, the kind of schooling you received, whether you've been in care, or whether you've been you were an asylum seeker, or whether you have caring responsibilities. So even within that, there's a massive spectrum and there's a massive sort of diversity within this pool, but also within that pool cuts across a lot of the other aspects of diversity that we all consider, be it gender, race and ethnicity, or LGBT considerations. And in each one of those instances, social mobility can affect an individual's I guess, experiences in a very, very different way. So one of my other key sort of points to emphasize is that with your program, if you're only looking at social mobility without also considering its impact in these different areas, then I think you're not getting the most out of your programs in terms of maybe what you communicate, what you're considering, and actually how this then feeds into your other targets or other aspirations for greater gender diversity or greater ethnic diversity, which is often a regular thing, particularly for top firms. I think with training and development, though, I think one thing that is often forgotten, can be forgotten, and this is from my own experiences in-house as well as externally, is that when it comes to training and development, we focus a lot of our attention on the individuals coming in and in terms of offering them the support. And it's entirely right that they should be our focus. But I think also with that, this is also an opportunity to actually educate our senior managers, but also our middle managers who are ultimately managing individuals in terms of, you know, their ability to manage difference. So we talk about soft skills, I actually call them critical skills. The ability to manage negotiations, manage a disagreement, give honest feedback, even though it can, and deal with uncomfortable situations and uncomfortable conversations where you're offering maybe feedback that could be perceived as negative. And I think in working with candidates from backgrounds who are slightly from backgrounds that are new to the firm or unfamiliar in terms of how someone might react to things, it's very important that we support our managers in order to do that, because I think in that you'll end up ensuring that your participants on your programs actually have a better experience. One other thing I might also sort of offer is, when we're talking about difference, what often happens again with programs of this sort is that we end up coaching individuals coming in to a point where they end up looking exactly like the people we already get anyway. And then you kind of question really what was the point of all of the diversity that we're trying to achieve if we just want them to be like the people that we've already got. We might as well just go to Oxford and Cambridge and all those other places where arguably we kind of get the candidates that we're used to. So I think one of the things that I've worked on through programs like Making Links at Linklaters, and also with some of the work I'm doing at McFarlane's now, and also with some of the programs that I used to look after when I was at Rare in the banking and financial services space, was really looking at asking individuals from underrepresented backgrounds questions that actually are difficult for us. Business related questions around technology, innovation, how they see the world, because often the perspectives that they offer on things are quite different, because one, the majority of them are Gen Z and most of us are not. Second of all, because of their experiences, which are rich and different to the ones that we have, they will see things differently. And often there's an opportunity there for us as a business to actually look at the problems that are foxing us from a very direct business perspective through very fresh eyes. And so the schools competitions that I introduced in my previous role were very much focused on ensuring that we got that fresh perspective and that we thought about things in a different way by considering them from someone else's perspective. So I think, you know, that there is a real opportunity here, not just to bring in greater diversity, but actually to improve the inclusion, because actually I think, just to build on Lindsay's point, diverse firms, diverse organisations perform better, but actually it's actually more inclusive firms that perform better, because actually having that diversity in is one thing, but if they're not necessarily understanding each other and really working with each other in the right way, then you're not going to really reap the full benefits of the diverse pools of candidates that you're bringing in. So I guess my four key takeaways are, when you're looking at these programs and thinking about how to engage your internal stakeholders and support the managers who are looking after them, think about your language and be very clear about your purpose. So understand the terminology, ensure that they understand the terminology and language that they should use, and make sure your purpose is a clear one, and ideally one that aligns with your business strategy, because you can't solve the social challenges that this world has, that we have in the UK. Data is super important, so understand your starting point internally through staff surveys, process maps, stakeholder participant feedback. Understand it externally by looking at your talent pool mapping, supplier feedback, thinking really clearly about your unsuccessful candidates and what their experiences were. The more you help them, the longer view you'll take. You never know, they might come back. And then when it comes to planning and setting targets, align with your organisation strategy, as I said, but develop the learning opportunity for managers and make clear who is responsible and accountable for the success, because it doesn't just sit with your recruitment team or your CSR team. There are elements for your L&D team, and there are actually elements for the leaders in your particular departments, and also for the managers as well. So make sure they're clear on what their responsibilities are and how you will be holding them to account. And that relates to executing an evaluation. Communicate on a regular basis with your internal stakeholders, because that's super important. Manage them very carefully, make sure you listen to their feedback, and definitely build feedback into the process and allow time for that, because that is the one aspect of programs like these where things fall down and maybe those improvements year on year don't necessarily get fed in. So allow yourself the time by, as Magdalena said, starting small, but also just making sure you allow time for that communication and have a robust communication strategy in place. So those are kind of a potted history of my views. Obviously, I'm really happy to talk about my views much more helpfully and much more directly if you have questions for me through LinkedIn or through questions to WhiteHat and 5% Club. So thank you for your time, and I really look forward to continuing this conversation offline.
Andre, and thank you everyone. Gosh, we have gone 6 minutes over, and apologies to all our audience today, but I think everyone will agree there was an amazing amount of content that we've just heard, and a fantastic lineup of speakers. So yeah, thank you to our speakers, Lindsay, Siobhan, Laura, Debs and Magda and Andre. Amazing content. We're going to share the slides with everyone. We're going to have the recording of this again on both our websites. And last but not least, thank you to WhiteHat, and in particular Elisa, who's the background person who's organised this all. Great session. Thank you everyone for joining us. Goodbye.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.